Taiwan is caught in a political limbo. Across the waters is China that claims Taiwan as a part of its territory. Countering Beijing is the United States that is playing the role of the neighborhood police. And this has emerged as the biggest flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific. Both the countries are not backing down. And now Joe Biden wants to arm Taiwan, a $1.1 billion arms deal for the island. Reports suggest the Biden administration is prepping for this arms sale. The package will include a $655 million contract extension for a surveillance radar, 100 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles, and about 60 anti-ship Harpoon missiles. It's important to note here both of these weapons have been sold to Taiwan earlier. The deal offers Taiwan no new military capability, but it could end up enraging Beijing. China says any arms sales to Taiwan are threats to its security. China's foreign ministry has called on the U.S. to stop the arms sale. This comes as Taiwan is ramping up its defense spending as tensions escalate with China. Taiwan has proposed a new defense budget of $19 billion, and this is a 13.9% increase from last year. It includes funding for new fighter jets and other equipment. The new budget accounts for 2.4% of Taiwan's estimated GDP. Taiwan says it is a self-ruled island, but Beijing views it as a part of its territory. And tensions have further escalated after the U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Threats of retaliation and military drills have raised concerns over China's possible response. Taiwan vows to counterattack if Chinese forces enter its territory, and proof of that came on Tuesday. Taiwan fired warning shots at a Chinese drone. The first time such action has been taken by Taipei. It comes after the Taiwanese president ordered the army to take countermeasures against provocations.
The more the enemy provokes, the calmer we must be. We will not provide the other side with pretexts to stir up a conflict. We will not provoke disputes, and we will exercise self-restraint. But it does not mean that we will not counter.
According to the Defense Ministry, the drone headed back to China after the shots were fired. There has been no immediate response from China, but in a recent press briefing, Beijing called it an act to incite tensions.
Taiwan is a province of China and has no Ministry of National Defense. The act of the Taiwan authorities to heighten tensions does not mean anything.
Currently, there have been a string of drone sorties from mainland China to Taiwan's offshore Kinmen and Matsu Islands. It's not clear who is flying the drones from the Chinese mainland. Kinmen lies just a few kilometers off China's coast. This means even a civilian could fly a commercial drone for that distance. However, Taiwan believes China is using grey warfare in the region. This means aggressive actions that use civilians and stop short of open warfare. And with me live on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. is John Erath. He is the Policy Director for the Center of Arms Control and Non-Proliferation in Washington. Thanks very much for being here with us. What, according to you, would this arms sale mean for the U.S.-China tensions and for the China-Taiwan tensions, which are already escalating?
I think you've already cited the main point, which is that the items included in this sale are things that have been transferred to Taiwan previously. There is nothing new in this sale. It is merely an extension of existing programs. It's also important to remember that the items that are being sold are defensive in nature. They are not something that could be used to seize territory aggressively or to conduct attacks against China or anyone else but are items most useful in defending Taiwan's islands from possible attacks coming from China or elsewhere.
According to you, how far is China willing to go when it comes to Taiwan? Taiwan also fired those warning shots aimed at the Chinese drone. That is the first time this has happened.
Well, I think it's very important to remember in this case that the escalation of tensions is coming about as a result of decisions being made in Beijing. We have a circumstance with a transfer of military equipment that is already in the Taiwanese inventory. Just as last month, there was a visit by members of the U.S. Congress. Members of Congress have visited Taiwan before. It's that in this time and this place, China has decided to make an issue of this and has decided that this is the right time to raise these objections and to increase the tensions across the Taiwan Strait. So there is some kind of calculation going on in Beijing that this is the time to increase pressure and maybe to see if there is a limit where it can push things so that arms transfers might be cut off, to find out where that limit is, to find out what they can do to cut off arms transfers. But I think it's all a very deliberate decision being made in Beijing to take these steps at this time.
And what about the calculations on part of Washington, D.C.? Because a lot of questions have been raised over the lack of consistency, as many put it, when it comes to America's stance on Taiwan.
I think the stance on Taiwan has been consistent for many years, that its status is a matter to be resolved between China and Taiwan. We recognize the government in Beijing as being the government of China, and hope that the questions can be resolved peacefully. So that much is consistent. It's important to keep in mind that arms sales are but one aspect of the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan, and the more complex relationship between the U.S., Taiwan, and China. There's a great deal of trade that goes every way in that dynamic. And that's very important to the economies of all the countries involved. So it is not in anyone's interest to start a military conflict that would have negative repercussions for everyone, especially when you bring in the fact that the US and China both have nuclear weapons and that a conflict would threaten to go nuclear. So it's up to everyone in this case to take the steps to diffuse tensions, to avoid extreme rhetoric and aggressive stances, and to minimize the chances that a conflict could break out.
John, we're leaving it there at the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast.
You're very welcome.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.